Antonio Canova was raised by his grandfather, Pacino Canova, a stonemason and sculptor. After his father's death, Canova strengthened his stone carving through apprenticeships with Bernardi and Ferrari. He also took life drawing classes at the Venice Academy of Fine Arts, sketching live models to improve his ability to represent the figure, a fundamental skill for a traditional artist. At the same time, Canova frequently visited the vast collection of aristocratic art collector Filippo Farsetti, where he meticulously studied terracotta models by Baroque masters like Gian Bernini as well as plaster replicas of classical Greek and Roman statues. Canova created his first independent work, 2 baskets of fruit. He received numerous commissions for portraits and mythological figures over the ensuing years as a result of his connections with the Venetian elite, including those for Eurydice and Orpheus, which created in 1775 to 1777 for Senator Giovanni Falier, and Daedalus and Icarus, which Procurator Pietro Pisano ordered and displayed at the Venetian Fiera della Senza exhibition. Canova aimed to imitate the ideal proportions and shapes of classical culture even in early works, highlighting the elegance and beauty of the figures and even portraying his portrait subjects in simple drapery rather than modern attire. Canova completed a tour of Italy in 1779 to 1780 and was welcomed by Venetian ambassador Girolamo Zulian. He established a studio in Rome and received a commission from Zulian to create the epic Theseus and the Minotaur, considered the first major neoclassical sculpture. Canova was inspired by classical sculptures, naturalistic drawings of live models, and 16th and 17th century paintings. He was surrounded by a community of artists from Europe who valued the direct study of nature, including Gavin Hamilton, Antoine Quatremere de Quincy, and Pietro Zaghari. By 1978, Canova had achieved such acclaim that Pietro Zaghari declared he had equaled the skill of the most famous Greek sculptors. Canova's Cupid and Psyche sculpture was commissioned by Colonel John Campbell Ang, bought by Joachim Murat, a French military commander and brother-in-law of Napoleon. Canova's prolific production and network of patrons solidified his preeminence in the 1790s. In 1792, he unveiled a papal monument dedicated to Clement XIII and published his first book. In 1796, the administrator of San Marco in Venice dedicated a room to his collection. Napoleon Bonaparte invaded northern Italy, dividing the region between France and Austria. Canova was assured of protection and continued to receive stipends from the Venetian government. After the French army invaded Rome in 1798, he returned to Passano and worked primarily on painting. Canova was honored by the Pope and appointed Inspector General of Antiquities and Fine Arts, and traveled to Paris to create Napoleon's portrait. Canova modeled a bust-length portrait in clay and used it as the basis for a monumental sculpture, but Napoleon rejected it due to its athleticism. He reworked portions of the marbles to improve on his first efforts. Napoleon and his family appreciated the power of neoclassical idiom and the sculpture's renown to legitimize their power. Canova created a portrait of Pauline Bonaparte Borghese in the guise of Venus Victorious, giving both the sitter and the work an elevated status. Canova responded to Napoleon's seizure of art in Italy by making his own version of the Medici Venus, which was widely acclaimed. Canova was summoned to Paris to make a portrait of Marie-Louise and Josephine, but the commission was overtaken by Napoleon's defeat and death. John Russell requested a second version of the Three Graces, which he worked on alongside the first. Canova was nominated by Pope Pius VII as ambassador to France and charged with recovering hundreds of works of art. He traveled to London to visit the patrons and museums, but his primary goal was to see the marble sculptures that Lors Elgin had removed from the Parthenon. He was rewarded with the title of Marquis of Ischia and 3,000 scudi to set up scholarships for students at the Art Academy. William Cavendish commissioned a portrait of George Washington and a memorial to commemorate 3 members of the Royal Stuart family, and Endymion was among his last completed works. Canova designed a neoclassical church dedicated to the Holy Trinity in Passano, financing himself and laying the cornerstone in 1891. The building was completed in 1836. Despite deteriorating health, Canova put in a lot of effort for years and kept traveling to oversee projects. He was particularly poorly during one of his travels to Passano in autumn of 1822, so he traveled to Venice for medical attention. Canova passed away there on October 13, 1922, in a friend's house. After the artist's passing, Giovanni Battista Sartori, his half-brother and heir, made sure that he would be interred in the church in Passano and moved the clay studio to the town, where they are displayed in the Museo Antonio Canova. The idealized proportions and harmonious forms of classical sculpture, in addition to mythological themes, were in Canova's opinion, the finest possible forms of art. Like other artists, he took inspiration for these concepts from Johann Joachim Winckelmann, a well-known German art critic, who had earlier claimed that Greek art demonstrates a noble simplicity and calm grandeur in gesture and expression. In order to support their own claims to power and prestige, rulers and aristocrats throughout Europe were drawn to Canova's neoclassical style, which helped to suggest a visual and ideological connection to what contemporaries believed to be the ideals of classical antiquity. The fame that followed from his popularity also allowed Canova to work diplomatically for a variety of different and occasionally antagonistic patrons. Canova was expert at carving and polishing marble, and despite having a busy workshop full of helpers, he insisted on finishing each and every one of his creations by hand. His sculptures have a lifelike appearance thanks to his balanced, flowing form, treatment of naked or lightly draped bodies, and smooth, well-polished surfaces. Canova blended his understanding of ancient Greek and Roman artifacts with careful study of the human form in his quest to produce modern classic works. He then merged these elements through the process of drawing and modeling to create compositions that were incredibly creative and innovative.